You know that story, right? The overnight success, that one flash of genius that just explodes into a billion-dollar company. But what if I told you that's mostly a myth? What if the real story, the one that actually matters, is almost always a story of failure? What if the secret isn't avoiding mistakes, but running straight towards them?
And you know who really gets this? The inventor, James Dyson. His whole journey is basically a masterclass in what we're talking about today. That the most valuable lessons, well, they're usually hidden inside our biggest screw-ups.
So here's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the real price of progress. We'll dig into the story of 5,127 prototypes. We'll look at some accidental breakthroughs. And then we'll ask a really weird question. Can a failure actually be a good thing? And then we're going to turn it all around and figure out what our own mistakes are trying to tell us.
Okay, let's start with a really fundamental shift in how we think. Failure isn't some bug in the system of innovation. It's a feature. It's actually the cost of admission.
Think about it this way. You don't get a college degree for free, right? You pay tuition to learn. Well, in the world of creating something new, it's the exact same deal. Every prototype that shatters, every product launch that totally fizzles, that's not a loss. Nope, that's a payment. That's the tuition you're paying for the education you need to eventually get it right.
And if we're talking about paying that tuition, wow, I'm not sure anyone is paid more than James Dyson. His story isn't just about trying hard. It's about a systematic, incredibly expensive, and ultimately brilliant education in what doesn't work.
Okay, just look at this number for a second. 5,127. That is not a typo. That's how many different prototypes James Dyson built before he perfected the world's first bagless vacuum cleaner. And let's be super clear here. Every single one of those, from number 1 all the way to number 5,126, was a total failure. But here's the key. This wasn't just him banging his head against the wall. It was a really disciplined cycle of learning. He didn't just build, fail, and try again. He built, he failed, and then he studied the failure. So when a prototype lost suction, that wasn't the end. It was a data point. It was another clue that got him just one step closer to the final answer.
But what happens when the problem isn't the prototype, but your entire idea? Sometimes the lesson isn't to just keep trying harder, it's to pivot. It's about having the guts to throw away your brilliant idea when an even better one accidentally shows up.
So you've got this company, ODO. They were building what they thought was the next big thing in podcasting. And then, bam! Apple announces that iTunes is going to have podcasts built in. Basically, their entire company was about to be wiped out overnight. So instead of fighting a battle they couldn't win, they shifted focus to a tiny little side project, a simple status update service. And that little side project? That became Twitter.
And you see this pattern again and again, finding gold in the wreckage of a failed idea. Take the gaming company Tiny Speck. They had this game called Glitch. Super ambitious, but it was just tanking. It was bleeding money. But their salvation wasn't in the game. It was in the tool they built to make the game. The internal chat program they created for their team was amazing. So they killed the game, focused on the tool, and that tool became Slack.
It's the same story, just a different app. The founders of this cluttered location app called Bourbon noticed something in their user data. People were ignoring pretty much every feature, except one. They absolutely loved sharing photos. And this is where the guts come in. They made a courageous choice. They killed their original vision to focus on that one single thing. You know that app today as Instagram.
Okay, so iteration makes sense. Pivoting, we get that. But get this, what if you could have a good failure? A failure that you actually, celebrate.
I know, it sounds kind of nuts, right? We're always taught that good decisions lead to good outcomes. But in the world of innovation, that's just not always true. In fact, some of the absolute best decisions can lead to spectacular, money-burning failures.
Just look at Amazon's Fire Phone. I mean, this thing was a huge flop. We're talking $170 million down the drain. By any normal metric, it was a disaster. But here's the wild part. Jeff Bezos didn't fire everyone. He actually praised the process behind it. Why? Because the really innovative technology they built for that failed phone became the direct foundation for Alexa and the Amazon Echo, one of their biggest hits ever.
And that right there, that reveals a huge secret about innovation. See, if you only reward good outcomes, you create a culture of fear where nobody's willing to take a risk. But if you reward a good process, even when it fails, you create an environment where the next Alexa, the next huge breakthrough, becomes not just possible, but way more probable. So,
We've talked about iteration, pivots, even celebrating failures. Let's pull it all together now and see what these stories can teach us about our own lives and our own work.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, from Dyson's workshop, we learned that failure is the tuition you have to pay for innovation, and that persistence is a process of learning. From the ashes of Odeo and bourbon, we saw that you have to listen to your users, not just your own cool vision. And from Amazon's Fire Phone flop, we learned maybe the most radical idea of all: celebrating a good process matters more than just chasing a good result. All these stories point to one powerful truth: sometimes your biggest failure is hiding your greatest success.
So I want to leave you with this one question. Think about your last mistake, your last failure, whether it was big or small. Stop seeing it as an ending, and instead, ask yourself, what tuition did I just pay? What is this failure trying to teach me? Because inside that mistake, that's not just disappointment, it's the blueprint for whatever you do next.